The airplane came over the eastern ridge, coughing like a bad conscience. At 52 I was splitting tarmac, which is honest work because the wood never pretends the axe has misunderstood it. 1 minute there was only the clean bite of steel, the resinous burst, my breath smoking in the cold. The next, a yellow single-engine plane clipped a spruce, shed a strip of wing, and bellied into my meadow with the long, metallic scream of civilization arriving uninvited. I found the pilot upside down, swearing with impressive technical range. "Can you move your toes?" I asked. "Are you a doctor?" "No." "Then why?" "Because if you can't, I'll worry. If you can, I'll still worry, but with more options." His name was Mono Rovello, 36, founder of an artificial intelligence company whose public offering he had just abandoned, though he saved that confession for later. He had a gash over one eye, 2 cracked ribs, and a left wrist shaped like a philosophical objection. I cut him free, dragged him across the wet grass, and splintered the wrist between cedar slats with strips torn from his absurdly expensive shirt. He fainted when I pulled the bone straight, which improved his personality. At the cabin I fed him willow tea, beans, onions, and biscuits hard enough to stop a smaller plane. Rain began before dark. It hammered the roof and hissed in the firewood. Mono stared at my shelves of old books, their spines swollen from damp, then at the kerosene lamp. No generator? I had one. It developed opinions. No radio? I had one. Other people developed opinions. He smiled, despite the ribs. "You live here alone?" "Not anymore, apparently." For nearly 15 years my mornings had belonged to frost, water and tracks. Elk stitching the riverbank, marten commas under the porch. Once the round, deliberate print of a wolf. Mountain silence is not emptiness. It is water under ice, a raven's wingbeat. The stove ticking as iron cools. Mono filled it with questions. At dawn, I gathered yarrow from the slope and shaved willow bark for his pain. Plants do not love us, which is one reason I trust them. By the 3rd day he was carrying 1 bucket from the river, while I carried 2. By the 5th he was chopping kindling, one-handed, badly. I took the axe from him. "Every problem can be solved," he said. "Your thumb is bleeding. A sub-problem. You people invented that word so consequences would feel temporary. We inspected the plane between storms. It was an old supper cub, fabric-skinned, more a bird than machine. The left landing gear had splayed, 1 wing rib was cracked, and the fuel hose had shed a black curl of rubber into the carburetor. The engine failure had been real. The rest, he admitted, was not. I stopped watching the instruments, he said, lying under the fuselage while I held the lamp. There was the silence, no investors, no employees, no feed. I thought, you thought silence meant you had become wise. I thought I could breathe. Same mistake. Fancier shirt. He laughed, then cursed his ribs. I began to like him, which was inconvenient. We scavenged straight spruce from the unfinished footbridge I had built halfway across the river and abandoned years ago. "Why build half a bridge?" he asked. "It reaches the middle perfectly." "That is the stupidest thing you've said." "You made a machine that writes wedding vows." Point taken. We shaped a new wing rib with plane and draw knife. We scarfed the brake, glued and lashed it, and patched the fabric with linen from an old flour sack. We drained the fuel, removed the cowling, cleaned the carburetor jets with horsehair, and replaced the rotten hose from Mono's repair kit. I straightened the axle in my vise while he heated a steel sleeve over the stove. The work was slow. Hunger sharpened us. Cold mornings made his splintered hand ache and my knees speak in small profanities. We worked until exhaustion stripped us of manners. At night we ate potatoes in their skins, trout when the river was generous, and once a grouse so tough, Mono accused it of dying from principle. He asked why I had left the university. I said, committees. He waited. I said, tenure. He waited better. So I told him about Becky, a student who called me at 2 a.m. for almost a year. I told him about the veterans, addicts, frightened freshmen, brilliant wrecks, and lonely colleagues who learned that my office light stayed on. I loved them with the arrogance of a person who thinks love can prevent impact. Then Becky died on a night I did not answer. "Not because I didn't answer," I said, scraping burned beans from the pot. "The dead deserve better than becoming evidence in our private trials, but I found out I couldn't save everyone, and instead of learning limits, I came here where no one could ask." Mono sat by the fire, his face gold on one side, dark on the other. "You didn't leave because you hated people. No, worse. I love them like an amateur god." He looked down at his boots, worn now at the toes from our work. "I walked away from the offering because we were selling prediction as understanding," he said. "Everyone said going public would solve things, money, scale, access. I knew it would also make the lie harder to stop. Optimism with a conscience. Disgusting. I'm still going back." That startled me more than the crash. Why? Because leaving was easy. The next rainstorm tore our wing patch loose and flooded the tool shed. I stood in the mud screaming at the weather, at airplanes, at men who mistook confidence for a skeleton key. Mono let me finish. Then he said, "The patch failed because you rushed the seam." I nearly hit him with a bucket. He was right. We began again. That was the test, though neither of us knew it then. Not whether we could avoid failure, but whether we could kneel in the wreckage without worshipping it. We stitched the fabric tighter. We gave glue time to cure. We stopped interfering with each other's hands. A splint works by holding and allowing, a fire by being fed and left room to breathe, an engine by admitting the exact mixture of fuel and emptiness. 6 weeks after the crash, Mono's wrist was thin but serviceable. The repaired wing held. The engine coughed, spat a mouse nest from the exhaust, and roared alive. We shouted like idiots. Ravens lifted from the cottonwoods, black wings beating the cold. That night, under hard stars, Mono said, "I can leave tomorrow." "Good. Do you want me to?" The fire shifted. A log collapsed inward, all its bright architecture becoming coals. "If you stay," I said, "you're hiding. If I go back unchanged, so am I." "And me?" "You built half a bridge." I hated him with unusual tenderness. At dawn, I packed salt pork, 2 old books, a clean shirt, and the letters from my sister I had kept unopened in the flour tin. Mono watched without triumph, which saved his life. "I'm only going as far as town," I said. "Of course. And I'm coming back. Probably." "You're a smug bastard." "My wrist hurts." "Good." The cub rolled hard over the meadow, bounced once, and lifted. Below us, my cabin shrank beside the river. The unfinished bridge reached one bare arm toward the far bank. Wind struck the patched wing, rain silvered the western peaks, and a pair of ravens dropped from the ridge into the open weather.